Hello, and welcome to this week's Geek TV, where we're reviewing the latest Doctor Who episode, Time Heist. Joining me on this adventure into the world of sci-fi and nerd is Digital Spy's very own TV editor, Morgan Jeffrey. Say hello, Morgan.
Hello.
This week's episode was basically Doctor Who meets Ocean's 11 as the Doctor and Clara took on the toughest bank job in the universe. So, Morgan, first up, did you enjoy the episode? Did it tickle your fancy? Was it a good episode of Doctor Who?
I had mixed feelings about this episode, to be honest. It was kind of aiming for, like you say, Ocean's 11 vibe, kind of a slick caper feel. And I thought it was quite glossy. And Douglas McKinnon, who also directed Listen last week, I thought he did a great job helming this episode. But for me, it was a little case of style over substance.
I really didn't enjoy the episode.
No.
I know we've been talking about it a bit. It really just washed over me the sort of entire 45 minutes. It felt like it needed to be 15 minutes longer. I think it was the weakest Capaldi episode so far. Would you agree with that?
I think it's interesting. I do agree that you said about it should be 15 minutes longer, and I do agree that there was too many ideas in Time Heist. I think, you had robbing the most dangerous bank in the cosmos. Fine, that's enough for a Doctor Who episode, but thrown in there you also had clones, you had a monster that sort of feeds on guilt, you had mutant shapeshifters, you had androids. There was just too much going on in 45 minutes.
It felt like if you're going to do like a bank job, thriller, there needs to be a bit of a sort of cliffhanger in it. But, that sort of, well, how are they going to get out of here sort of situation.
Yeah, one of the problems with the episode is you're thrown right into the middle of the action, and then the episode never really pauses for breath. The characters are on the run, and you're kind of on the run with them. And as you say, there's no time for the emotional moments to kind of hit you. There's peril moments are just thrown away, and there's no real time to build any tension. It's all a bit breathless for me, and that was another reason I don't think Time Heist quite worked.
What did you think of the teller? I guess some people would be pleased to have a sort of old-fashioned Doctor Who monster.
Yeah,
it was very much like a sort of rubber suit, a man in a rubber suit monster.
Yeah. As you say, it was nice to have kind of an old-fashioned monster thrown in there. I did like the kind of method of murder that the teller used, where it would kind of melt people's brains, turn them to soup. I thought that effect of the collapsed head was kind of a little bit creepy, a little bit freakish, without being graphic or gory, as Doctor Who's not really allowed to be. The monster itself, I felt like the design was, as you say, it looked a little bit like a man in a rubber suit. It was a little bit silly looking, and so that did rob it of any real scare factor for me, I think.
Oh, I quite enjoyed that. I like a good, rubber-suited monster. I liked it in the two tellers went off romantically walking into the countryside at the end in the distance. So.
Well, I will say this for the tellers, is that their romantic reunion at the end, that affected me far more than anything that happened to the shapeshifter or the android guy, whose names I can't even recall. The supporting characters in this episode were incredibly bland, I thought, which another problem with this episode. Lucky you've got kind of Peter Capaldi and Jenna Coleman being so great as the Doctor and Clara, because otherwise, the supporting cast was a bit lackluster.
I guess another underwhelming part of the show for me was sort of Keeley Hawes' role. She was sort of sold, especially in the preview, as being sort of this big villain. Didn't really get her teeth into the episode, I don't think.
She has surprisingly little screen time as well. I think she's barely in it for a lot of it. And I think when you land an actress of her kind of talent, and she's quite a big name, more so than ever after Line of Duty, where she got so much kind of acclaim for that role, I think it did kind of throw her away a little bit. I think maybe because they were trying to conceal this whole twist with that character that, she was a clone, so they kind of tried to maybe play her down on purpose, but it just left the character a little colourless for me. And yeah, like you say, I don't think it was really enough for an actress that good to sink her teeth into.
As ever, we love to get your questions on Geek TV. Please leave them in the comments under the article or on the YouTube page. And one question we got last week for you, Morgan, from Matthew Higginbottom. I have a question for Morgan. What is your take on this? My opinion is that they're focusing too much on Clara and putting her too much in charge. We love the Doctor because he is fantastic, not just his companion. Do you think I'm wrong? And there's quite a few people in the comments last week complaining that it's become too Clara-obsessed.
The Clara show.
Yeah, basically.
I think there has been a strong focus on Clara this series, but I think the show badly needed that. I've said before how her character was a little bit bland before. I've always thought Jenna Coleman was great, but she had a lot less to work with in the previous series. This series, the character is a lot more forceful, a lot more spiky, she's got a lot more personality. But I like that. I think it really works. I think her dynamic with Capaldi is actually more successful than the one she had with Matt Smith. She's a little bit more strong-willed, but that works because this Doctor is a little bit more callous, a little bit more cold. So you need her to be a little bit more, heated in their exchanges, I think. So I think it works. And also this idea of the companion being the main character, which the series has leaned on a little bit more in this series. That goes all the way back to 1963, where in the very early William Hartnell episodes, the Doctor's kind of almost a secondary character, and the real heroes are the companions. So there's many different ways you can do Doctor Who. You can have the Doctor be this big dynamic lead, as he was maybe in the Tom Baker era, the David Tennant era. This is going back to kind of the early way of doing things, where the Doctor's the sinister guy on the sidelines almost, and the human companion is the hero.
I guess it just depends then on what your take is on the companion. If you don't enjoy the companion, then that could be a problem. But then it could be the same if you're not a fan of that particular Doctor.
Yeah, if you don't like Clara, then you won't like Clara having so much focus. I love Clara, so I think it's fine that she's taking centre stage.
Okay, I'll pass the message on to Jenna Coleman. And also, a second part of the question from Matthew, if you can explain how they ended up in the shack last week in Listen. Gallifrey is time-locked.
Yes.
Come on. Explain this.
I can. That's a really good point. That is a really good point. I don't know. Because, as he says, Gallifrey's supposed to be in some pocket universe. Gallifrey's time-locked. The TARDIS can't arrive on Gallifrey, or the Doctor would just do it whenever he likes. That doesn't make any sense. So, email Stephen Moffat on that one, not me. I don't have the answer to that. Ask Moffat.
Timey-wimey nonsense. Second question, John 637. Does anyone else think Morgan Jeffrey is one of the sexiest Doctor Who geeks they've seen thus far?
Wow. John 637. Is it John 637?
John 637.
John 637. That's very, very flattering. It's a boon to my fragile ego. Okay. So that's very nice. That's my response to that one.
Okay. More messages of love for Morgan. Very much welcome. Next week's episode, The Caretaker. Are you excited, Morgan?
I really like the look of the trailer, actually, and it'll be exciting to see the Doctor finally meet Danny Pink. That's kind of been teased a little bit in these preceding episodes. My one concern, it looks a little bit like The Lodger, the episode where Matt Smith moves in with James Corden. It basically looks like that in a school. And the follow-up episode to that, with James Corden, we kind of had the Doctor working in a shop. And it feels like another of those episodes where the Doctor tries to blend into a domestic environment and fails spectacularly. So it's maybe something we've seen before, but I'm still excited for it. It looks kind of like a quite light-hearted episode again, but it looks quite cool, quite funny. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that one.
So Doctor Who does Grange Hill, basically.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for.
Which sounds amazing.
That does sound really good.
I don't know what we're worried about, yeah.
Peter Capaldi throwing a sausage across the corridor or something like that, I don't know. Sadly, that's all we've got time for this week on Geek TV. Please come and join us next week in 7 days' time, where we'll be talking about The Caretaker. Thank you, and see you in 7 days' time.